Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Sheila Matthews, and I listened to her on Business Game Changers, and somebody also recommended her as a guest, and I was like, oh yeah, great. So I've been reading through some of her materials today. If you see this on Rockfin, Rumble, or X, you'll see a website, AbleChild. But the subject of our topic, and it is a timely subject, is the drugging really of children and the kind of mental health crisis that's kind of going on, and suicides on the rise. And it's kind of pretty ugly out there, but we were talking the pre-show. There's some good things happening, and there's some of this stuff is really timely and in the news these days. But she can talk more about that. So Sheila, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, and AbleChild is delighted to be of service.
Awesome. So for people who might not have heard you on other programs or about your organization, maybe you can talk a little bit about your background and kind of what got you interested and involved in the subject.
Sure. I'm a mother of two. My children are older, but when I was living in Connecticut, my son was 7 at the time, and I was faced with the school pressuring me to put him on psychiatric drugs for ADHD. And I happened to tune in right before I was going to my meeting at the school, and I saw Mother Patricia Weathers, who's my co-founder, testify before Congress. And she had said that she listened to the school, put her son on Paxil, and she no longer recognized him, and he ended up violently trying to attack her. And when she removed him from the psychiatric drugs that were required by the school, they no longer allowed her son at school. So we teamed up together. She helped me and saved me from years of a psychiatric treatment for my son, who is a successful adult who is married and is running his own business now. And so that's how I got into this battle. I never did drug my son, but vowed to join forces with this mom who broke through the ceiling and was able to tell her story in front of Congress. So that's how I got involved.
So it's been a while, like this kind of pressure to provide pharmaceuticals to kids goes back decades now. It's pretty incredible. I don't know what the numbers of children on pharmaceutical drugs are, but I think it's just increasing. Is that correct?
It is increasing, and the foster care children in state care on the lower end through Medicaid are very vulnerable to this because there's government contracts that provide a formula of drugs that the vendors use. So they're the most vulnerable, but the parents in schools are being given improper information. So yes, it's increased. And I've been working on this for 23 years. My son is now 30.
Wow, incredible. So like this is also, I think, overlaps with just what they call big pharma now. So this is one component, and there is a pretty important financial incentive for them to keep these people, keep the kids drugged up, right?
Yes, they're very lucrative behavioral health contracts. So it's two components. It's one is the front group that has to diagnose the children off of these subjective checklists that they are using. And then the second component is the pharmaceutical industry, and they work together, and then they have these government contracts, and they just have so much incredible power that it's almost impossible to get any sort of reforms.
Wow, yeah, it's incredible. I was talking to you in the pre-show. There was this video going around social media recently within the last month of people, like I think a guy was going in, either bringing his child, but every time these psychiatrists would just go, you have ADHD, and now it's time to take some Adderall or Ritalin. Like Adderall is literally almost, I think it's one like chemical link from meth. Like it's off the charts. So they're basically putting people on very hard drugs, adults and children. It's incredible. Like, and they don't get off them, right? Like there's no incentive to get these kids off of these
No.
heavy drugs, right?
No, there's no exit plan, and that's something that we're trying to really educate lawmakers on, is that it can no longer be cradle to grave, because parents are becoming more aware of the fraud of these labels, and that's what it is. It is fraud. It's basically telling parents that based on a checklist, no blood work, no brain scans, no DNA, that your child has this and that your child's going to need this the rest of their lives. And it's a completely unregulated, so it's a crisis, and the side effects of them are like with Adderall. We did an article that was picked up by the Gateway Pundit, which is, Adderall is basically, like you were saying, it's like cocaine, but it causes increased risk of suicide and psychosis. So these drugs are becoming very clear that they're linked to these mass killings. And so we stumbled into AbleChild after trying to reform everything. We had helped a parent that lived in Sandy Hook. Her son was taken by the state of Connecticut and was not given back to her, and because she refused to continue to drug him. And we formed a relationship with this mother, and then she invited us up to Sandy Hook when the mass killing had occurred. So then we started to get involved in trying to get the mental health records of these killers.
Right. So that was kind of one of these things, is like what really happened in Sandy Hook. That was 2013, I think, or something like that. Was it Sandy Hook killing?
December of 2012.
2012, excuse me. And so that was another thing, is like they never disclosed Adam Lanza, who arguably is the shooter, his history. Like there's still questions about that. Is that correct?
Yes. So our organization worked for a full year with an investigative reporter that is now on my organization advisory panel, Kelly O'Mara. She worked in DC. She's a very seasoned investigative reporter, and she basically helped our organization dig through the hundreds of pages of the report that was released to the public. But the way they did it was so random. The pages were all mixed up, but we were able to pull out pieces of the ballistics report, and the mental health records were never released. The psychiatrist's name was withheld for a year and then was released after a year. So we had to dig all this information out. And so really where we are with Sandy Hook all these many years later is that, number one, the ballistics report does not tie Adam Lanza to the guns that were used. And, I have the ballistics report, and not many people read the investigative report from Sandy Hook, but it basically says that Nancy Lanza and Adam Lanza, when they took the DNA, that all the swabbings and samples could not be matched. The bullets that were, and there was quite a bit of the bullets that were gathered up, they could not be matched. So the ballistics report is really, really important for people to understand. So basically, I'm not a police officer or a crime expert, but the two most important reports are the ballistics report and the autopsy report. So that's where all the physical evidence is. And if you withhold that information, then you have all the speculation. So for the last, I want to say 12 years, there's been all these conspiracies, and but this is the doing of the state of Connecticut, because they refuse to release the documents. Even to this day, our organization sued the state of Connecticut. It was AbleChild versus the chief medical examiner, a card who has since died. But we sued and we went before the FOIA Commission, and we were denied access to the records.
Wow, that's incredible. Like, why wouldn't they be transparent? And that's such a huge cultural event too. Like, people got sued. Alex Jones had to go to Connecticut, I think. Like,
Mhm.
there's all kinds of things associated with that event. Also, gun. They all take the guns away. That's always it. But maybe the problem, they need to take the psych drugs away, right? Like, that might be the bigger problem than the guns. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. We testified in all the hearings that were held in the state of Connecticut. We showed up to every single hearing with all the gun owners. And at the time, we had a proposed bill trying to investigate the link between the psychiatric drugs and actually gaming, like the Xbox, where people, I don't know, gamers probably know this, but you can get on a game and talk to perfect strangers.
Right.
So we really wanted the ability to have an investigation of the games and the psychiatric drugs that were found, the gaming portion of it that was found in the investigation. And, Adam Lanza was treated at Yale Child Study Center. So we know that he was on psychiatric drugs. And in fact, his mother went to Yale Child Study Center and said, my son is having a bad reaction to Concerta, and they labeled her as non-compliant.
Wow.
And so a lot of this information is not really discussed. So what happened there was the entire investigation was hijacked by, I believe, and I believe I have enough evidence to say this, is special interest of the psychiatric and pharmaceutical industry. And then they launched this massive attack against the guns. They bust people in. We were there the day that they bust hundreds of people into the state capitol. And we were in the back room testifying on all these massive mental health bills that were being pushed through at the same time the anti-gun legislation was being processed, in the
Wow.
public.
So, like, a rental mob shows up, but it's probably USAID money or something, like black budget stuff. I mean, this is how strange it's been, and that's only recently been discovered, all this stuff through Doge. But it's incredible to think, like, how little disclosure. And wasn't the psychiatrist who was involved with Lanza, didn't he have some ethical problems too? Like, I think, wasn't he? Didn't he have his license taken away eventually or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
So on our website, you can actually, on our work, we have a tab that's called Sandy Hook, and you can see all the work we did for a year up against the Hartford Current. We were actually in a war with them. Each week they would put out a story and we would debunk it, and then they'd have to come back and challenge our findings or switch up their findings. And one of the things is that we did find out that Paul Fox was the treating psychiatrist after a year. And then we did a deep dive and we found out that the state of Connecticut actually was in the process of taking his license away because he was accused of rape.
Wow.
And drugging this young woman from Connecticut a university. So we called the state attorney, Stephen Sadinsky, and we told them that we wanted him arrested because what we found was that he destroyed his records prior to the required year, which is 7 years. A psychiatrist has to hold their records of patients. And then we had a flood of parents that were coming to us that Adam Lanza's Dr. Paul Fox at the time, he's no longer a doctor because they stripped him of that. He was drugging other children, and we were given the records of this other child who is so brain damaged that the child can no longer leave their home, and they never did anything to him. So we called and called, and then Homeland Security arrested him when he landed back on the United States soil, because what happened was he left during the whole first year of the Adam Lanza's investigation. He went to New Zealand, and
Wow.
we believe, and I can't say that this is fact, but we believe the behavioral health vendor helped him to relocate while the entire first year of the investigation was going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is wild. So he went so far as to go to New Zealand. Then he got arrested in New Zealand because he was working there illegally. Wow. And like
Right.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, what happened was there was so much scrutiny. Our organization, as along with many other organizations that work in human rights in mental health, were calling for his arrest once they released his name, and even people in New Zealand were outraged. So he had to leave there because they started ratting him out. So he had to come back here, and he was completely shielded by the behavioral health and the psychiatric and the drug companies. New Zealand, I believe, is the only other country that allows direct-to-consumer drug advertisements. So it's a very dark network of psychiatrists that shielded him. And the
Wow, it
other
really is.
treating the other treating psychiatrist was Dr. Robert King, and he was at Yale University. I believe he's still working at Yale. He was never, though he was exposed as treating Adam Lanza, and the one that said that Adam's mom, Nancy, was non-compliant in the police report. He was never held to account for anything. And he also, the really bizarre, not bizarre, I want to say troubling link to Dr. Robert King is that he was soliciting patients for a research study for Tourette's syndrome, where they were doing implants and very risky human rights, like where we as our organization would be very concerned about the children potentially being used in these
Unethical, like the Hippocratic oath, do no harm, right? What happened to that?
yeah.
Yeah, wow. So here's the other thing, like the theme of the show, suicide. So this guy treats Lanza. Lanza goes, supposedly kills people, goes to New Zealand. Then he has complaints there. Then this poor guy, Nicky Stevens, kills himself. And it might not even be, it might be the treatment, the drugs, because these guys are worse than drug dealers. They're like state allowed drug dealers. Like I'm reading through your website. It's insane what some of the stuff was able people to actually prescribed to one person: Ativan, Saffris, Abilify, Nuvigil, Prozac, Zyprexa, Xanax, and Vistaril. Is that one patient?
That's one patient. And
Oh
it's
God.
never been studied the way that our country is right now. It's called off-label prescribing, and there's no oversight. And this industry, as they were attacking the gun industry and bankrupt, they bankrupt the Remington Steel. And this industry is allowed to give children, and we have numbers that are 0 to 1, and children 4 years old that are given cocktails of these drugs that have never been studied in the human brain, and it's just not talked about. It's like, if you bring it up, I mean, I've worked on this long enough to know that I even wrote articles in relation to Alex Jones, just because of the FBI connection that we found. that was testifying against him. We tried to publish the article, and nobody would allow us to publish it because it had Alex's name in it, Alex Jones. They were like, "You're aligned with him?" No, what we are aligned with is the truth of children and what happened here in Sandy Hook. And you're just labeled a conspiracy person
Right.
if you talk about it.
Right. Conspiracy person. They always say if you have the same kind of antagonist views, you're aligned with them. That's what they do. Or you're a Putin apologist or some nonsense like that. If you're against the war. What was the FBI article or the FBI information that you had?
I went to Alex Jones' trial in Waterbury, and the FBI agent that testified against him and is involved in the lawsuit to this day, never got a waiver, or it was not shown during the trial that he was allowed to profit off of this crime scene.
Wow.
So that was our issue. We were like, wait a minute, you're not releasing any of these records. Now you have this FBI agent basically testifying against Alex Jones, and he ethically didn't get a waiver to profit off of this crime scene. So we just felt it was important because we've spent 10 years or more basically punishing this, whatever public figure over everything, while our data and our reporting has been suppressed by the media. And children are dying because they're using they used Sandy Hook, the same organization that broke yesterday, that is Sandy Hook Promise, where they were being funded by the government to take down Alex Jones. Sandy Hook Promise was pushing mental health, and we were outraged because we're human rights organization. We're the voice of the voiceless, and we have no stake in this. We don't get federal funding. And so here the Sandy Hook parents are taking their loss, and the president at the time, Obama, flew them in the presidential airplane down to DC. We went down to DC at the same time, and nobody would hear us. Nobody would allow us to talk about the psychiatrist or the drugs that Adam Lanza was on, or the lack of integrity in the investigation. And we think this is really unethical.
I think so too. I mean, so how was this Sandy Hook Promise? How is it being funded through what type of conduit?
Well, there were grants through the federal government, and I believe Alex Jones has now disclosed some documents through the Department of Justice, who should be impartial in this, and they're funding this organization. And so our organization is like, well, this is part of the problem. This is corruption. These psychiatrists were allowed to escape the country. And we had to sit through CNN lecturing us about the need to abandon our Second Amendment and our liberties regarding mental health, because they want more and more control over our behaviors with these experimental drugs on children in foster care, in the school system, in the military. We've done massive investigative work into the military with Robert Card, who shot up all of Maine, and the Maine was shut down. Well, it turns out he was treated at Four Winds psychiatric facility in New York. And all those documents are on lockdown. The common theme here is they're locking down the mental health records while they're going after the guns, bankrupting companies. And so that's where we are.
Right, bankrupting like political antagonists too. So I think Jones, that's part of it. They try to bankrupt him. I don't know what the proceeding is, but like there's been stories of like fire sales at info wars and other things. Like I think the trial that he was in Texas, they didn't let them present countervailing evidence. Like that's a fixed legal system, and it's like this fixed system where they just ignore other evidence. They don't even bring it in because they already have a set outcome, which is
Yeah.
very telling and should be telling to any rational, reasonable observer that these already have preset outcomes, which is like very strange. And just Sandy Hook is one of the strangest events ever. Like, why isn't there full disclosure? It's not the only case. You talk about this guy Robert Card. There's just this one, and in the news, this Hale kind of came out recently. She was in the care of Well, I think she became a he. Was in the care of psychiatrists from like age 4, doing drugs. Like, this could be the outcome. Like, can you talk? I mean, we, like you said, we don't know the outcomes of these drug cocktails. Maybe the government does, but I bet there's no study of like what happens over 10 years of some kid taking 3 different medications. Like, it's crazy.
It's really crazy. And this particular case in Tennessee is all about the mental health documents. And so the police department is being trained. What we uncovered in Tennessee is that they're being trained by NAMI, the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, and they're funded by the pharmaceutical companies. And so they're training the police officers to say, you can't bring out the mental health records because you would stigmatize all those people who are seeking mental health. And that's the same reason why we were denied the FOIA in Sandy Hook. Was a lot of people would go, quote, off their medications. But in Tennessee, they were training the police department and with these grants. And then what just recently came out, which is it really, really illustrated it by the Tennessee Star. The Tennessee Star was suing the government for all the records. And so what came out was a couple of days ago that the police officers said they didn't want to release the document, further investigate any mental health because the parents didn't want them to. And that's against HIPAA. Everybody talks about it's against HIPAA to release these records. And in fact, there's an exception to HIPAA, which is anything that affects public health or safety, you're allowed to release mental health records and medical records. And if there's police investigation, they have the right to look and pursue mental health records. If not, how would you, if like with Adam Lanza and this other kid that was being treated, if there's a lack of informed consent in the treatment and these kids are on all these psychiatric drugs, it prevents the government from looking at their records. If the government can't look at their records, how do you enforce informed consent? Did the patient know that this was experimental? So there's exceptions to HIPAA. And so what the Tennessee Star found out was that in the documents, it said the police listened to the parents and said, we're not going to look any further into the mental health records. It's crazy.
It's crazy. That is the public safety. This person, trans person, a lot of trans violence going on out there, by the way. We've had a trans death. Guy killed his parents in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. But like the public needs to know these people are on mind-altering drugs. These drugs have to be characterized as mind altering. And there's so many, like the list of these people who are on meds is encyclopedic, isn't it? Who've killed people?
It's amazing. And even the FBI says that 23% of the killings are people on these psychiatric drugs. And the media and the law enforcement and the legislators are saying there's no link, there's no correlation. So we were able yesterday, actually, a bill that took us 2 years to get passed in Tennessee just passed the House and Senate, and it's heading to It's heading to the governor's office, and it basically says that if you commit a mass murder, your blood can be tested for psychotropic drugs and released. And they're going to start doing a correlation between these mass killings and the psychotropic drugs that are in the body at the university. I think it's a good start. I really do. I feel like it took 2 years to pass with AbleChild wrote the bill with Amy Miller, who worked for Bobby Kennedy before he became Secretary of HHS, and we worked on this bill for 2 years, and so it finally passed yesterday. And so we are not even to the point where we're getting pressed out on it yet,
Wow.
but we're hopeful.
Well, I'm glad it's going through the states. At least states are exerting their rights and making changes and looking into these things and maybe Bobby Kennedy will do that as well, like a whole new fresh breath of fresh air. But like, it's so funny, this NAMI, they present themselves as a grassroots organization. Like, it's, what do they say here? The only grassroots organization. We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. What a joke. These big pharma always try to make them, propagandize people with their stuff. But man, the kind of money they're making is in the billions, right? It's every year.
In the billions. We just released two articles on the Butler assassination attempt, and the money that is behind the players that were in Pennsylvania is crazy. So we have the Congressman Mike Kelly, who was the chairman of the task force, withholding the autopsy and the ballistics report, the toxicology, and the Pennsylvania State Police report. So he's got all these documents, and he won't release them to the public. And so we put out this call to action because he now is promoting this mental health. It's hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in tax credits for accelerated research in mental health. And we're really shocked. In one hand, he's withholding all these documents linked to Butler. We know that the parents who are shielded, like the psychiatrist was in Sandy Hook, those two parents were behavioral health experts. We don't know who they worked for, if they worked for Genesis, the behavioral health, and that the owners of the nursing home where the alleged shooter was working. And I say alleged because they don't tie any of the physical evidence. Remember, in the beginning, we talked about the physical evidence is the autopsy report and the ballistics report, and that includes the toxicology report. So those are the physical things. And in the ballistic report that they did refer to, they said that the bullets, were consistent with the gun that was found. That's not science. It's not, anybody who shoots and knows guns, you would not use the word consistent with. Either they match the gun or they don't. It's like a fingerprint,
Right.
So
it's incredible. What's the rationale that Kelly has for keeping these documents for the public? Like, I thought this was the transparency administration. I think it would be in the interest of Trump too, to let the public sift through this information.
He says it's because they're too graphic. The autopsies are too graphic, but we watch television, that CSI, we see things on television that could never compare to seeing a dead body on a gurney. And the report, that correlates with the photographs of that autopsy. What we do know is that they burnt the body.
Right.
And we do know that there was a lack of custody of the body on the roof. So we don't know whose body was on the roof. And the media keeps pounding. And I know this long enough to tell you that with Sandy Hook, the whole red herring and how everybody went after Alex Jones and the guns, they're trying to pull the same thing here, hoping that America is so stupid to think that it's Thomas Crooks on that roof. Well, show us the evidence that actually physically ties him to the roof. Telling us that is not physical evidence.
Right. Why don't they just release it to the public? It's in the public interest. They almost changed history. Somebody did by killing Trump at that moment before he even had a vice president. It would have thrown the right into total disarray and chaos. I mean, it would have changed history, really. Um, it's important. I mean, this is like JFK, like covering up and not releasing evidences and stonewalling. Like this, there's something corrupt's going on. Give me a break. People who can't see, like disturbing. It's the same rationale of like the roof is like at too high a slope. Like, come on. At this point, these government figures are so corrupt. They don't really even serve us. They serve themselves, and they should release those documents immediately. Somebody's like Trump probably doesn't know the details of this. He's probably back in the bubble that they put him in when he was in office before, but all this stuff should be revealed. And the same weird thing happened with the Hale thing, right? Audrey Hale. Kash Patel decides to give Megyn Kelly the 1,000 pages of her manifesto, and nobody's seen it. So she had this. I don't know how that makes sense. Like, how does that make sense? I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
No, I'm worried that they are either afraid to release the documents because it will take down, which I don't think it will, the pharmaceutical industry or damage psychiatry in some way. Maybe they will lose their contracts. And, the drug companies are very, very powerful. The industry of psychiatry is embedded in our school systems. They have a monopoly in the Association of School Psychology. And I don't believe by telling the American people the truth about this industry would make it dissolve. I mean, the tobacco companies at one time were funded by Big Tobacco, was funded by the government. And, I don't think that our government should be funding behavioral health. If you choose to do that, go do it. But I think that these entities, really need to be held accountable. I believe that Trump would be served to release these documents because, I've learned over the years that this industry has access to very sick individuals that have been on these drugs for multiple years, and they can be manipulated very easily. And I think that he still is, as we know, I mean, it's a big threat to his life. So the FBI director did a very bad thing to the journalist in Tennessee that spent a lot of money pursuing legal action to get these documents, and then just to release them to Kelly, is, to me, is a favoritism, and it's just as corrupt as the last administration. We can't allow that. We can't allow to be cheerleaders for one party over another. We have to hold them both to the same line.
I totally agree. And it can't start right now. You cannot let this stuff happen. It's just off the charts. I think it was the Tennessee Star sued them, right? Sued to get
Yeah.
those documents too. Like, this is outrageous already. There's already uncomfortable things about this administration that are allowing things to go on as business as usual, which isn't acceptable. The last one was so corrupt.
Mhm.
But and the financing, we have secret financing of things that aren't disclosed that come out of our tax dollars. So we're literally paying taxes to get the worst type of treatment and propaganda and lack of facts. Like, it's off the charts. Like, it shouldn't even exist. Um, but we could do a whole show. We could do probably 5 hours on how many people shot people who were in the care of psychiatrists, psychologists, taking drugs for a long period of time. I mean, It's legion, isn't it? Thousands and thousands of cases. I mean,
It
in
is.
some, I remember another story was the killing that happened in Hollywood where the guy's wife, she was on antidepressants and she killed him in bed. Hartman, the Phil
Yeah.
Hartman, like there's just, and I think he won a lawsuit. He won a lawsuit against Zoloft or something because she flipped out and killed him. It's like a tragedy, like a beloved actor or something. That's just one of many cases, and so many of these things are going to be covered up. Like they're not going to go after the real cause, which isn't the person's unhinged. It's that they're on a mind-altering drug.
Well, it's really interesting in the bill that just passed in Tennessee. You can go on the Tennessee a government website where I forgot the bill number right off the top of my head, but the video of the debate on the bill being passed was very telling. It was, well, there's no evidence, and then one of the guys said, well, it's if you focus on psychiatric drugs, you're going to let the gun people off the hook. It was a really
Wow,
fascinating
wow.
debate, and it's a debate we need to have. There's nothing wrong with diversion opinions, and I'm hopeful that we could get some legislation for human rights. There's no reason why we should be giving cocktails of drugs with no exit plan for patients, and then um, allowing them to drug our foster care system to the point where they just drug them into homelessness. There's no achieving any drug-free outcome for these children because they're too valuable for these behavioral health vendors. I'm more into that aspect. The drug companies, they have the black box suicide warning on the drug. It increases the risk of suicide, but the data that the psychiatric industry is presenting to the lawmakers is basically so fraudulent. They don't say, well, these 10 people who committed suicide, 9 of them were on psychiatric drugs that carry a black box suicide warning. So it's a violation of human rights, and every human being should care about this, because it's not just them killing us, not being really free to go to movie theaters and send our children to schools, but it's also the fact that they're killing these young children that are hanging themselves, and that's really, it's a human rights crisis.
It really is. It's unbelievable. Like I 56 now. When I was growing up, I don't remember any of my friends or anybody really taking any pills at all. I don't recall that. I remember people being tomboys or having tough times at home, but they just kind of weathered it. I don't remember like, okay, the solution is drugs. Like, wow, it's really changed for the worse, and I don't the health consequences I've got. I
Well,
mean, you're doing meth, like you're doing meth for a long period of time or whatever, at
mm.
least on Adderall.
Well, Megyn Kelly, too, this is all a very diversionary tactic of Kash Patel to release it to her, because now you're talking about the whole trans issue. The whole trans issue really goes back to psychiatry again. It's mixing the hormones with the psych drugs and everything. So it's just human experimentation. And then you go into talking about trans for another month, 2 months, and we're just not getting to the legislation that we need and the protections and the guidelines that people ought to be getting before they decide to go on these psychiatric drugs.
Right, right. There were really interesting empath documents that were released by a journalist, Michael Schellenberger. I don't know if you saw that, but it showed that these doctors were very unethical and almost like salesmen. Like they had like a plan to overcome rejections or objections and knowingly didn't tell the parents. Like it's unbelievable. So if you're out there, guys, and you send your kid to a psychiatrist who can prescribe drugs, be very, very careful. You really got to be careful. And these, I mean, it's so corrupt. It's really Awful. Sheila, we're at the 45-minute mark. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I missed?
Well, I have two calls to action on my website. I have the petition for federal hearings. I need 10,000 signatures. I believe I only have right on the homepage. There's a button that says petition on the top, and I need 10,000 signatures. I did have something published in the Gateway Pundit today, so my signature is increasing. I'm hoping that you do that for me as well. We are going to bring that to the White House, and then so we have the petition, and then we have the call to action on our homepage to kill the bill that Congressman Kelly has introduced, and the bill number is right there. All you do is call your congressman and you just say, we oppose this bill, and then I give you reasons why. Lack zero human rights protections, and you could go into, let them release the documents first and then we'll talk about this, so I'm hoping to kill this bill.
Great. So it's both a petition, so people sign that. I will sign that right when we're done. And then also a call to action. And that one just came out a couple of days ago on your website, AbleChild.org.
And you can donate to.
Yeah, donate to or support this. It's an important cause. Like you're doing it for people who aren't able to defend themselves. They're young, they're naive, they haven't seen the corruption firsthand. That's one of the things that I've found talking to younger people. They have just a sense of trust towards adults that they shouldn't. Some of these people are worse than drug dealers, in my opinion. Like they're horrible, horrible people, and they're doing a disservice and harm for their own financial benefit that has increased and it's gotten worse over time. So it's terrible. I'm glad you're out there doing the work. It's Sheila Matthews, and the website again is AbleChild.org. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, stay there.
Okay.